All right, welcome everybody to this third webinar in the series on data maturity. You might not hear me super well because we have two microphones and I gave our two main speakers the microphones, but I hope you can kind of understand me. Let me know in the chat if you hear me loud and clear. So thanks all for joining. I'll quickly introduce myself first. So I'm Chris, I'm the founder and CEO of Data Minded. We had two webinars already with my co-host Charlie, loud and clear, awesome. This webinar will be not about more theory. So we talked first about why should you do data maturity, what is data maturity in depth, and Johnny will summarize it for a bit later. But now we have data maturity in practice. So stop all the slides, stop all the bullshit. How do you do it in practice? And there was nobody better, I think, than Wannes that we could find. Wannes has done quite a few data projects. He's led several teams. But there, I think others have done it as well. What I really appreciate about you, Wannes, is that you're also very open about what has worked and what didn't work, right? So I think you're very good in consolidating and sharing your learnings for other teams to be successful with data, right? But before we come to you, Wannes, maybe Johnny, can you quickly say hi to the audience and recap the learnings that you had from the previous webinar?
Yeah, so my name is Johnny Dane. I'm a senior data engineer at Data Minded, currently working for a large financial client and also focusing on the data maturity index. So last two webinars, we talked about why data maturity is necessary for companies. Most companies have quite some ambitions with regards to data or machine learning. And data maturity is all about checking how scalable and sustainable you can do that, especially when you are delivering data products. So that's the why of data maturity. And then we presented our framework with 6 key categories and 4 different levels: awareness, explore, accelerate, and lead. And then we have the categories: organization, people, product, process, technology, and data. So we have worked on a data maturity scan for that, where you can score your own organization's data maturity in less than 10 minutes. So we invite you all again to do that if you haven't done that already. And so today I think we'll dive a bit deeper into these things in practice and check whether they're actually viable.
Maybe an interesting find, like more than 100 people now completed the scan.
Yeah.
And it gives us very good, it's a very good tool for us now to look at patterns. So what is common across companies, what is different? And so definitely if you fill out your scan, you'll get a good overview of where you are as well.
Yeah, that's also something we see in the future, that you can score yourself against that benchmark and that you can see where you as an organization want to go, where is my industry going, and how do you position yourself in that.
Yeah, because you get results like this, and these are all example companies where first you get a map of where you are, and then also you can also draw a similar map of where you want to be. And you see every company is in a different phase of data maturity, right? Some are just getting started and it's fine. Others are really like the yellow company, they're really quite advanced already, investing a lot in data and reaping the rewards.
And as we said before, it's all about finding what works for your organization, identifying where you should improve.
Yeah, indeed. So with that, maybe before I'll stop the slides for a bit, let's first introduce our main host or our main guest of today, Wannes. Welcome. Can you maybe quickly share a bit about your background, why are you here, and why you think it's relevant to talk about data maturity?
Yeah, maybe indeed, why am I here? As you said, I've been leading quite a lot of data teams. I've started as leading a consultancy firm at Kronos. I've implemented multiple times from scratch a data strategy, a data platform, first use cases. Main examples, Ascent and then Golazo, where I'm currently CTO. So I can provide insights from the both of them. But next to that, I've also been heading the data team at DPG Media, so quite different scale, quite different maturity. Yeah. Another moment during their process, I stepped in. And there again, I think I can learn quite a lot of learnings, as you said, both talking about successes as failures, as of course there's been quite a lot of failures. Bit about my background myself. I'm a mathematician from education, so that always means I do understand machine learning algorithms. Next to that, I can program, but no one wants to put it into production. Yet it helps to understand the team when discussing certain problems. I do understand and I can translate to higher management. You've already discussed a bit why it would be useful. I'm happy to share learnings and failures. But I think one of the reasons as well is that I have a certain vision about data and how to use it. And again, I've been communicating about it quite a lot. And main point there is I truly believe one should deliver value from data. It's looking towards the value. It's not looking how to build a platform. That's secondary, and yes, you need it. But in the first phase, how can you make sure your team brings value from data for your company, for your customer?
It's a massive cliche, but still companies are struggling with it, right? So yes, we want to create value from data. Every company wants that, but still it's apparently not easy to get there, right?
It's definitely not easy, and it starts from it's hard to measure what's the value of data and what's the value of your use case. When is something due to a marketing campaign based on a machine learning algorithm? When it truly comes from a recommender engine, or when is it just styling? So it's really hard to measure. But I would advise you to at least think from what would be the value and focus there, and not start doing data as, hey, my competitor is doing something, so I also need to do. Yes, fine, but what do you need to do, and does that bring value for your company?
Maybe that already brings us to our first topic. So we have three topics defined, three topics that we want to discuss with Wannes today. And the first is indeed how to get started. Like some of the teams, some of you listening are already quite ahead in your data journey, but some of you I know are just getting started. They want to build their first use case. They want to build their first data platform. They want to get started today. So what is your recommendation there? If you have a team now to get started, how would you approach that?
Yeah, I would say select the use case that you believe brings value. Don't try to prove technology will work, because most likely all of them will work. And yes, you need to select one which fits you, suits you best. But select a use case that truly brings value. Try to understand what it is, and preferably a use case that is rather small as well. If you can focus on one department or one data source, that helps you to prove value faster.
Yeah.
In this case, I always like to give the example at Ascent, Belgium energy supplier. So in the end, what you're doing is selling energy contracts. Main use case we had identified is a churn model. Which customer is going to end this contract? We took 1.5 years to truly build an entire amazing data platform and an entire amazing use case. It took that long as well due to the fact that the operational system was moving. But in the end, we've invested 1.5 years. And saved 23. If you estimate the value of 23 customers invested is terribly wrong. Whereas the second use case, we did a forecast, how much energy do we need to buy? Because what does an energy provider does? He buys on the open market and he resells. Mm-hmm. There's running 600 million euros on a yearly basis through that. And profit was around 10 million euros. So if you're off 1%, half of your profit is gone. So that's a truly valuable use case. And it only uses contract data, so one source. It only supports one department, sourcing and pricing. So it's much easier, would have been much faster, and gain a lot more value. And that was the use case that proven the value. Yes, we need to do something with data. Yes, we need a data platform.
And how do you avoid that you end up with the wrong starting use case, or one with a very bad ROI? How do you avoid that?
Partially understanding your business. Why did we select churn? Because in an energy sector, that's the holy grail. The better you can predict churn, the better it was. But people were already having a churn model in previous technology as well, based on the previous operating systems. If we just would have asked, how many do you actually save? We would have known, we could have estimated, and with quite a lot of use cases, you can do this. And I'm quite certain some are really hard to measure. Plus as well, you need to think, what's the value in it? DPG Media, we were trying to personalize content. So what's the next article you should read? What are you optimizing for? Is it just clicks and the ad revenue, or do you want to sell a subscription, so it's subscription revenue? Then it becomes much harder to estimate. So you also really think up front, what's the value I want to reach? But in some use cases, it's quite simple, and you can definitely make a high estimation.
Yeah, so it's about being ambitious in your use cases, but not necessarily on all fronts. Like you said, you build a full data platform at Ascent for that first use case, while you would have been better off selecting a smaller use case and making smaller increments.
Yeah. As said, we had a first use case covering mostly all data sources. You need payment information, you need contract information to predict, will someone leave? And it doesn't bring value, whereas the first one was, you just need contracts, end dates, and their estimated annual value, and based on that we can do something for a first team, and it brings value. It shows lots faster what's in there, because ingesting all your data sources, you've done it probably more often than me, that takes a long while before you ever get value from it. So make sure you have first end-to-end use case, preferably on just a smaller subset of your data sources.
And that also provides a powerful signal to the business side, I think, of an organization. If you have a small case that you can deliver in a reasonable amount of time that has a good ROI, you might get more budgets.
A success case always works.
Yeah.
In the end, it's about having trust that you will deliver, and having trust that you will deliver something valuable. So if your first use case is a success spreads. Hey, what we've did, they're doing our job way faster, and they're doing it quite accurate. Let's see what they can do for you as well. That's the internal marketing you need.
Yeah, indeed. And that links back to the discussion we had earlier today, that for your business, they really don't have a clue what you're doing in your data platform, right? And they shouldn't care either. And that's why, again, if you bring a use case that adds value, a lot of the other discussions go away, right? Because the moment you add value and the business can play with things that you deliver, then you have a constructive discussion about what can we do next. Well, if you're not delivering value, it's like, hey, why is this process taking so long, and is this ticket not resolved? Like, you get all these negative conversations, right? And sometimes companies don't focus enough on just doing a simple selection of use cases. So yeah, that's a very good point. Maybe also, Johnny, we can link that to our data maturity index, and I'll share some slides again. So how is this relevant for us? Well, you identified two dimensions where this is important.
Yeah, I think if we look at the organizational dimension, we spoke about value. I think the clear ROI we have on there, that is something that we can definitely relate to. That's something that you start seeing more as your business evolves, I think. And the more use cases you build, the more important that will remain. And as you said, selecting use cases based on the value that of course, you cannot be accurate often, because you cannot estimate everything correctly. But you have to get a ballpark idea of what it will be and the impact. As you said, the predictions at Ascent, if it's like only a handful, you might not want to spend that much time and energy on just that and select a different use case.
Indeed. And the other dimension that we selected here to discuss was product. Can you share also why is this relevant?
Yeah, so from our view, we look at the product, both a data product or a general software product. So it's both aspects of that. And we focus heavily on the health of the product. Do you have a good plan on scaling it? Do you have a good plan when things go wrong and things like that? And how do we evolve from internal to external data products? So to me, that's also relevant in selecting a case. Maybe you have less risk when you build an internal case like you did at Ascent. It's an internal use case. It's not something that you offer to as a B2C service or something. So there, the selection also makes sense, in my opinion.
Yeah, and also during the process of reaching your first use case, how much maturity do you already want in this product?
Yeah.
What do you need to actually prove your use case? In the churn model, the proof of the pudding is how much people do you actually retain when having the correct marketing message. So trying to predict something and then proving the accuracy of your prediction model, that doesn't bring value. It's how many people can you actually convince to stay. Whereas the forecast, energy supply forecast, it's fine if your end is just an Excel. People can work with it, can have a manual workaround during the first weeks to actually prove value. So it's also less complex. But you've thought up front, up until where do I need to make my product mature? Is it fine to do it once and just prove value, or do I already want to have an automated process from first step? So also in the first step, think about how mature your product needs to be for now to prove the value of your company.
How far do you industrialize it? Finding that right balance, like what is good enough for a first version?
Yeah, but do productionalize it.
Yeah.
But if your first version, as you said, if your first version is just an Excel sheet, you don't need to worry about disaster recovery or high availability, though it's an Excel sheet, right? And we calculate it once a month, so there's somebody manually making sure running the scripts to once a month deliver an Excel sheet. That might be good enough for a first version, right?
Yeah. Indeed.
And then you don't need to over-invest in the technology I mentioned. Yeah. All right, that was the first topic, how to get started. So imagine now, we followed your advice on us. We have our first use case live. We get high fives from business. We are successful and we get more money.
Yeah.
Now what? How do I repeat my success?
Yeah. Now I swap to Golazo, my current employer. We're mostly an event organizer. What we do is we organize sports events where either you can watch professional athletes, Memorial Van Damme against 6 Days of Ghent, or where you as a customer come run or cycle yourself. So Antwerp 10 miles, for example. Most of our events are not sold out. So first use case we've identified is let's try to increase the attendance rate, and that will bring value for the company. It's free money.
Yeah.
The cost is the same. If you get more people there, it's free money. For a second use case, think on how you can expand this use case. So what we do next to this is we have the Start to Run app, people for the first time running. We have physical tests, we have training schemas, so more towards actually professional athletes or just a segment below the truly enthusiasts. This is something which we can perfectly link towards what we're already doing. If you have a marketing campaign that tries to bring in new people, during the touch points, for example, you have for a specific event, you can also cross-sell. You've registered for 3 kilometers, 5 kilometers. Are you interested in our Start to Run app? You, for the first time ever, registered for a marathon. Maybe you want to have a physical test. Maybe you want to have a training schema. But for that, you need to identify which new data sources do I need to connect. Start to Run registrations, physical test registrations, because you don't want to offer something to someone that already has it. Yeah. You work together with a new department, the ones organizing the physical test. So it's about small expansion of what you already had towards multiple departments while enjoying the data sources you already had. And this will bring you to a complete ingestion from all data sources in a while every time again delivering new end-to-end value.
And at that point, I feel like you need to start providing some structure or some conventions. You're talking more about the product side now, the data side, like we scale our sources, we scale our product, or we add new features. But there are challenges, I think, as well on the organization and the people side and the process side.
Yeah, let me start with process side. I believe scaling from use case 1, where you've proven value, to number 2 or 3 or 4 is where you start to bring a process, to automate stuff. Yeah. What you don't want is in the end you have 4 proof of concepts live in production, and then you need to start thinking, how do I keep this running? So from that moment on, you start thinking, what do I actually need? And by always introducing only the complexity you truly need. Again, looking to the energy supplier, the main predictor of churn is people looking to the price page. So the marketing manager said, well, give me this data in real time, I want to send an email. That's a huge complexity. You need to identify someone online, stream it to your marketing solution, immediately act upon that. While anyway, it's creepy, so you don't want to do this. So avoid this complexity. It's fine to ingest this data in batch and to build your use case upon that. So really think what's the minimal complexity that I need, but automate it. So that later on you don't have too much technical debt, while thinking up front, where do I want to head in the future? At DPG Media, news recommendation, what's important is to know who's behind the screen. What's telling you who's behind the screen is his latest behavior. I'm sharing my account with my wife, I'm reading sports, she's reading showbiz, so my last article tells you who am I. And that's actionable. If in the near future I want to do this, think already up front that you're not taking decisions that will stand this in the way, but only do what you really need now to introduce your use cases. So that's what I would say for processes.
Yeah, and those are processes that also go hand in hand with the product and automation. How would you see the evolution in the company? Like you start typically with a smaller team and you start growing that. When and how do you introduce processes there to keep scaling and to keep that sustainable?
It's also a bit based on the maturity of your team. In total at DPG, I was leading 70 people, 2 groups of people which are completely different. One were truly product organized up until front-end development. Others were data engineers. They need different things to develop their product. The most important for a front-end facing product is having the design and also thinking about user experience with regards to data and offering purely data engineering, so not the end of the process. Most important is on latency of data, for example. So it's truly different discussions you have. What I would advise though is at all times bring your engineer as close to possible to your end consumer or to your customer. What we were doing, for example, at DPG, I could have given demos every 2 weeks. No, it's the people giving demos because they know the product, and also don't get a product owner only talking to business and try to translate what's going on. No, in the end, it's the engineer that needs to understand it. So,
didn't you get a lot of pushback from that? Like engineers, like, no, why do I need to go to business? And then business people getting nervous, like, why is this weird engineer talking to me? Can't I talk to a manager?
Well, how the business person thinks, I really don't care. No, that's bold said, but I'll come to that a bit later. From the engineering point of view, yes, until the first fuck up. Well, we've understand from my product owner that, and he did it. If you had spoken directly, you would have known. Yeah. So now people are standing at your desk to fix something which you could have definitely prevented.
Because it just got lost in translation.
It's got lost in translation. So yes, they don't like it, but from the moment you point on the pain point in that process, people start seeing the value for them. And actually the same holds for business. I can tell though that I had the luck to have been working with quite communicative engineers. So I never had the business person, why do I need to speak to this creepy engineer? But they as well see value. I can directly ask what I need and they understand. The biggest risk by bringing them together is that at a certain moment they'll just start visiting your desk, and that's also something you don't want to get.
You also want to shield your team a bit from interrupts and allow them to focus.
Yeah, so you want to get a structure around this so that there's not always questions popping up that need to happen yesterday. Yeah. But there's definitely value in bringing those people together.
Yeah. So it's about closing that gap, I think, and making sure information comes across as it should.
Making them understand and also making them understand why.
Yeah.
If you look, I've been at DPG Media for 2 years. What I've been doing is phasing out 2 on-premise systems, saving on cloud costs, bringing everything together to one scheduling environment. It's not really fun to do, but if you look to why do we do this and what's the value of the use case, and then people start to get to be motivated.
But that takes also effort, right? Being a manager, you have to have the right mindset to explain the things in the right way and to connect the dots all the time, I think.
Indeed, it's about to continue repeating the vision you have. This is why we do stuff. This is why we do something like this. Maybe even links to buy versus build decision. I believe we should buy whatever is not our core business. Yeah, but we can build this ourselves. Yeah, definitely. I do believe you can build this yourself, but I want you to deliver value for my company, and the value I see is there.
Yeah.
So let's take this managed service but do also communicate incremental. You can do it once in a large setting, but you need to keep repeating and keep adopting small things instead of not referring to that vision for 1 year and then having a second strategy session where everyone thinks that this is quite different than last year. So if you keep communicating about it, keep having those small changes, the team is led towards what's coming.
That's visibility, right? Some things you want to measure and continuously show, some things you need to communicate all the time to make sure that it stays fresh on the mind.
Yeah, and this is visibility of vision towards the team, but the same holds for visibility of the team towards the company. You need to make sure that your data engineers are not locked in the basement.
Yeah.
People need to know them, because I am convinced there's value for every company from data, yet you need to identify it before you start with it. But if you get them out in the open, people understanding data can help you to identify the value of data, but you also need people understanding your business, and that's your data engineer. So you need to bring them together, make everything visible, and let's discuss what's feasible.
Yeah. It's surprising how you explain growing your success after your first use case. It's very people-oriented, right? You're very, very much focused on making sure everybody's aligned, making sure the processes are there. I haven't heard you talk much about how to configure a cloud environment or how to scale a data warehouse.
I believe that mostly with whatever technology you choose in the data world, you'll be able to reach your goal use case per use case.
Yeah.
There's sometimes better choices to reach something with the entire vision you have available, but indeed it's about making sure that people understand how this data thing works, what is feasible. People don't know, so it's about bringing the right people together and really focus on identifying what we need to do, and from there I believe most of the things you identify you can do, and then it's about the technical discussions. And actually my business doesn't care how much my cloud cost is, and some of the work we will have is focusing on limiting the cloud cost because it can rapidly expand. So those are important, but not in the beginning and not as a key discussion.
Maybe to bring it back to you, Johnny. So we also again identified, let me share the screen again, 2 dimensions that are linked to the discussion we just had. So how to repeat success. First dimension is process. We had a big discussion about process. Johnny, can you clarify again?
Yeah.
What's on this slide?
So in the maturity index, we focus heavily on technical processes more. We focus on getting the right tooling in place, making sure you have the right practices among people, giving feedback, limiting work in progress, using security tools where you should. So we focus a lot on the technical aspects. We also see that the way you look at process is also more connected to the people side and to the organizational side, which is also a thing that's very important.
Yeah.
So I think that's also maybe an upgrade for the data maturity index that we can apply at some point to get more of these processes inside as well.
Yeah, on the other hand, what we also see, also coming back from the scans that we do, is that companies underinvest in these processes. What you said for your first use case, it can be an Excel that you manually calculate every day, but don't do it 4 use cases in a row, right? At some point you need to bring in automation, or you just grind an operational technical debt, right?
Yeah, correct.
And then the other dimension is the data dimension, because you mentioned now for the first time it's not probably you're going to go cross department and you need to go shopping for data. So
indeed, if you look at this carefully, it looks a lot like data governance, a lot of these aspects, but points that stand out here are scaling. At some point you start scaling, as you said, you go to multiple use cases and you want to keep on doing that, you want to do that sustainably, and also self-service. I think that's a very important term here, is that people are enabled, that there's ownership, people can do the tasks they're assigned to or that they assign themselves. And then the ultimate thing here is data mesh, which we will dive in a moment, I think.
Yeah, indeed. So it brings us to the third part of the third topic. So again, once I followed all your advice, so I had my first use case, then I had some 3 or 4 follow-up use cases. I get more high fives from business. I might be invited to a golf session with the CEO because I know he's happy with what I do. But now I start to feel like all the departments come to me like, can you do this, can you do that? Like, And I'm starting to feel like I'm becoming the bottleneck in my own data, I'm a bit the victim of my own success here as the data lead. So how can I now scale this use of data across the organization without all of them coming to me to do work for them?
Yeah, let me first take one step back. Johnny already mentioned data mesh. I'm an active member of the data mesh community. I think I was the second speaker on their meetup as well. So let me first try to explain a bit what it is. I had a presentation at Strata in February this year, and I was thinking, well, how to actually define the data mesh, and I somehow got into an existential crisis because I don't know. But what I do see that it's something that likes to tackle certain problems. So indeed having a central bottleneck team where everyone, hey, I want this data, can you bring it to the data lake? Hey, I want to have this transformation. Oh, and by the way, I also need this field in my report. Well, that doesn't really work, but also about quality. Typically, data quality is handled during your data warehousing transformations. Doesn't really make sense. That's completely behind the scene after the facts. You should take it into your operational system. So it's also about bringing ownership more towards the teams producing data and making them responsible for the quality of their data, and making sure they get it into an environment where everyone can access it. Which will also increase the stability of your platform. Again, making people responsible. I was talking about the churn use case. Part of the 1.5 years is because we were still developing the operational system. Yeah, but make them available to get out of there. This is what we consider a customer. This is what we consider an energy contract. And every change you do to your operational system, I don't care. Get your data in the same format, consider it an API. It's not an API, but it's a contract about data. It keeps getting there in the same format so that everyone behind you in the chain can use that data. So that's quite a lot about data meshes. So it's about spreading skills throughout an organization, decentralizing skills, making people responsible for their own data, and making sure that the marketing team can enclose data from all mails that have been sent or they clicked and so on, but can also use data from the subscription team. These are all the people we want to email. So it's about having everyone having their own data products with their own business knowledge in there so that you can move on.
Maybe a quick question on the centralized model. You say that doesn't work?
Well, that doesn't work for a certain size. So now at Golazo, we have 2 people working with data. Doesn't really, it doesn't make sense to decentralize 2 people.
Yeah.
DPG Media, setting of 40 data engineers and a bunch of machine learning engineers. It starts to make sense to decentralize them. Probably an even larger organization having hundreds of data people, it doesn't make sense anyhow to get them central because they can't talk to each other anyway.
What starts to go wrong then at that scale?
Well,
the communication part?
It's a part of communication, but also I always thought at DPG Media we had 40 data engineers for an IT team of 600 people to enable 5,000 to 7,000 employees to reach millions of people on a daily basis. You cannot expect 40 people to completely understand that business, to understand how advertising works, how marketing works, how subscription works, how back office works, how publishing works.
It's domain knowledge.
It's the domain knowledge that you miss. It's the system knowledge from other source applications that you miss. It's the business value that you don't see or don't get into detail. So it's about getting people with those data skills again closer towards people having the right knowledge and to make sure that knowledge is in there. Typically go watch in a source system, find your customer, that's 7-8 tables. If you're lucky, you only have one system.
Yeah.
Times the number of systems. You cannot expect from this data team to truly understand what every field is. Someone else knows, so let's bring them together.
Yeah, so you need experts with data knowledge and the domain knowledge in the teams.
But if I can challenge it, Wannes, you're kind of, if I'm the new successful data manager, I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot here.
Yes.
Because you're saying spread your engineers and your scientists to business. Well, but then I will have less people reporting to me. I will probably get less budget. How do you deal with that friction?
At DPG Media, I was writing a decision record where I stated I now have millions of euros on a yearly basis responsibility. Next year, I want to have zero budget. Because I truly believe that if you want to build something, you should take the ownership. You should know the cost. What typically happens now is a central team is setting up a Snowflake environment, an AWS environment and stuff. All budget is coming to you. But you're not the main user, so you have zero power to actually try to limit the costs, and the one actually building something and going crazy on your cloud cost has zero interest in reducing the cost. So that's quite a lot of friction. Yet next to that, I also see quite a lot of companies struggling with that mentality. Yes, okay, but aren't we risking that people then afterwards are cutting in the data costs? And I do agree that's a risk, but into my opinion, that's a risk you can try to put some governance on top. Whereas keeping everything central is way harder to reach your end state. But indeed, it's a struggle I see quite a lot of companies having.
And related to that is the other discussion about, okay, you have decentralized teams and you have some interfaces that we agree on, or APIs or contracts, whatever, you have some central governance, but for the rest you also give them a lot of freedom. And so how do you deal with the two extremes? So the one extreme is everybody does whatever they want, you get an explosion of technologies and an explosion of implementation is very hard to manage. And on the other hand, if you standardize everything and everybody has then we're back to Java enterprise, right? Everybody does it my way.
When I entered DPG Media, we were in the first phase, so a bunch of explosions of technology. Not truly, everyone started off from the same blueprint, but anyway, it diverges. So what we did is first let's standardize it, and I do believe in standardization. It helps you and it enables you. But then afterwards, what we did was saying, okay, now fine, if you really want to diverge, you're allowed to. For some parts, and I'll come to that a bit later. But if you want to diverge, it's you that maintain it. So you're not bringing it again to a data team that becomes a run team. No, the data people need to bring value, and you need to have a limited platform, and someone needs to maintain that, fine. But we're not going to maintain whatever everyone is trying to use.
And that's a classical mistake. I see companies make like you have a cool build team, and they get all the new technologies, and then once it has been deployed once, you have a run team, and they get from all sides. I have to run everything. Well, there's like the lack of domain knowledge. Also, these run teams, they have the lack of knowledge about all these different stacks. They have to run all of them. It's a recipe for failure, right? And still, we see that decision being made a lot.
Yeah. But I also don't believe in the full governance, because then you'll lack out on new technologies, and there is value in there. Yet, and definitely when you're scaling to data mesh and truly decentralizing some responsibilities, you need to have some governance, and most likely this will be new architectural decisions being brought by data mesh. You need to have a data catalog. You need to get out there what data do I have, and there it's quite clear. Everyone needs to use the same data catalog we have. You need to register your data source there, and maybe we're only supporting 3 or 4 formats. It needs to be on S3, on the Kafka stream, or in Snowflake. We're not going to support millions of them. So there you need to adhere to the standards we have. But to get there, feel free to use Spark, SQL, Python, whatever.
Whatever flows your boat.
You have a common interface with the other teams, essentially. I think it's a difficult exercise in finding that balance, though. Like, how much do you standardize? How much do you enforce? Do you then also start experiencing friction from teams who say, I want full control, or how do you deal with that?
You'll always get friction from the moment you state you need to use this tool. That's normal. Again, like in the previous step, you need to explain why. We as a company cannot support 20 different tools, because then we're just maintaining and we're not building. We as a company want to make sure that we can connect all data. So yes, it needs to be registered on a single place in a format that we can connect together. So explain why, what's the value? both
ties back again to that value you set in the beginning.
And both for the company, because now we can connect and we can do this cool stuff which is happening later on. As for you, because you follow our standards, you don't have any maintenance hassle.
Yeah, indeed.
All right. Johnny, maybe also for the third topic, let's dive back into the data maturity index, because we have two dimensions left. And I see some questions coming in. We'll answer the questions in a bit. By the way, if other people have questions, feel free to shoot them in the chat of the demo meeting. So the two dimensions we have left is people. We discussed about decentralized knowledge. Johnny, can you walk us a bit through what we say here about maturity in people?
Yeah, so we heavily focus also again on the technical people, like acquiring the technical skills, but also on the awareness of managers. Like how much technical knowledge do you need as a manager? They at least need to be aware of what's going on in the team so that they can speak to the teams. As you said before, you want to close that gap between business and technical people. That is part of that. And also what I think is really important here is a continuous improvement.
Yeah.
You also said you start small and you keep adding things. To me, this aligns with the continuous improvement mindset. And that's also about culture. How do people behave? How do they fit in the organization? And explaining the vision of the organization continuously can also help in reaching that right culture.
Maybe to add for the continuous improvement, when moving towards machine learning, again, a next step comes in. Do you want to improve your machine learning model or not? That's a really hard question, because upfront, if you're estimating how long will a data science or machine learning project take, I don't know. What do you want? Do you want me to reach 80% accuracy, 90% accuracy, or whatever measure you're trying to reach? Later on, I have 80. Do I want to go to 90, or do I want to have a second use case? That's also again something where you need to discuss. Do I need to have a continuous improvement on this use case, or is my continuous improvement more the entire data landscape where I build a second and a third use case?
It also seems difficult to estimate how long it will take. I mean, even if you time box an improvement, if you say I want to reach 90%, it's really difficult.
It's either setting a goal or time boxing.
Yeah.
You can't have both. You can't say, I'm going to reach 90% in 2 weeks. You won't be able to do that.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference for either time boxing or setting a goal?
My preference is setting a minimal standard. What do I truly need to make this use case valuable? Churn use case, being able to convince people, I need to do better than random, at least. Otherwise, and now I'm really minimalistic, I'm exaggerating, but setting a minimal goal, this is truly what I need, or there is no value in this use case. For improvements, I recommend time boxing, which can be once in a while, you again look, has something been changed? Well, you need to observe your machine learning algorithm anyways, it's still performing, and rethinking with whatever new use cases, new data sources I've ingested, can I add some more data that makes the model more valuable. And I would recommend even more, at least in the beginning, looking to more data than trying more complex algorithms.
Got it. Right. And then the final, surprisingly, but the only dimension we didn't talk about yet is technology.
Yeah.
So Johnny, can you walk us through that?
So there we see technology as a dimension that is maybe the least challenging of all, because as you also said, technology, you can make it work, right? If you want to use a specific part of technology, you can always get there in the end, only looking at the technology. What we identified as important things are also for exploration using the cloud technologies, so that you can fail fast as well and that your time to market is lower. But also one thing that stands out is build versus buy decisions. We briefly touched upon that. Are you going to use a managed service and you're going to pay for it, or are you going to build it yourself? Those are things that we also see as very valuable. Having the knowledge and making those decisions, that's really crucial in finding the balance. Also, industrialization is there. We also talked about that, like how far do you go in industrializing? When is something ready? Is the Excel sheet you mentioned, is that already good enough for a first version? And you want to go to production, but how far do you take the entire process? Finding, again, the right balance is key there as well.
And we were pre-discussing a bit more about the buy versus build discussion.
Yeah.
I do believe that for most of companies, and probably most of the viewers as well, building a data platform is not your core responsibility. It's getting value out of it. It's the use cases that are on top there. So I would definitely advise to have quite a lot of managed services. But then you come into that friction that engineers state indeed, but this is a cool problem. I can solve this, and I definitely agree. You can set up your own Kubernetes environment. You can host your own scheduling tool like Airflow. You can do whatever you want. You can do something about access management. You'll manage to read something. And then they tell you this is going to take us 3 months. And an engineering manager that doesn't understand engineering will say, okay, then it's worth it. An IT project will most often take longer. And in the end, you need to maintain it. So try to look what's not core, do this take this as a managed service. And what is core, that's what you truly need to build.
And what's also there is that things that are easy at small scale become super complex at large scale. So take your access management example. If I do my first use case, I can manually configure my S3 access paths. I can manually add a user, blah, blah, blah. But then if you're at a scale of like some of the clients we're facing, like hundreds of use cases, dozens of users, dozens of platforms even, and then have a data access system that you can kind of still manage and maintain on your own, and kind of guarantee that in fact all the access is set correctly. It's a super hard problem. That's a super hard problem, but you don't realize that when you do the access management for your first use case. You're like, oh,
Yeah, this is manageable.
I can write policy.
That's why you need to introduce the minimal complexity you need, but keep thinking where you're heading. We're going to run into this problem anyway, so do I need to tackle it now? That's a discussion you need to have.
Maybe that brings us to our conclusions, because I'm also kind of wary of time. So we made a nice slide from the conclusions. So maybe Wannes, if you can share the 3 thoughts you have, or the 3 tips you want to give away to data leaders in the field.
Yeah, I think the thing I said most is start from value. Yeah. What's the value you get from a use case? Try to identify upfront, is it worth it? And keep asking yourself that question over and over and over again. But then while scaling, like I was just saying, introduce complexity only when you need it. As long as you don't need real-time complexity, stay away from it. From the moment you do, please do so. And that's why I also need to think upfront, where are we heading? What's the vision we have? If once we'll run into streaming, make sure that whatever you build is compatible, that you don't introduce too much technical debt at that moment. But in the end, it's all about the people. There's a few people that understand data. There's a few people that understand your business, and it's bringing them together and make sure you can actually deliver that value, and let them identify what the complexity is. Because I do believe most of the things you identify, you're able to do so, but you'll only be identifying them by putting the right people together.
Yeah, indeed. So from the audience, if there are more questions, feel free to ask them here in the chat. You can read them aloud. I see Dieter not really asking a question, but mentioning that the discussion fits perfectly in the team structure described in the book, team topologies. Small platform teams and enabling teams should support the product teams. I think that makes a lot of sense here. So thanks for referring to the book.
Well, actually, maybe linked to an insight I had. My first vision for DPG was cutting out the platform team by trying to decentralize again and making everyone a bit responsible for the platform. If you need something, feel free to write this extension. Yeah. I truly believed it would work, but in the end we saw it didn't really work because there's no one feeling ownership, as said. Yes, new features you need, those will be developed. Yeah. But from a cost perspective and a maintenance perspective, then things get lost. So I truly believe indeed, again, into team topologies, and indeed it's out there. Get a platform team responsible for what you need, but keep it as small as possible, because the true value is happening outside.
All right, cool. With that, I think we're at the end of our webinar. Wannes, thanks again for sharing your insights with us. I learned a lot. It was very useful to have this conversation for me. Maybe for the ones listening, we want to quickly link back to the data maturity index.
Yeah.
Johnny, maybe you can.
So on the one hand, we have the data maturity scan where you can score your own organization, but we also have a white paper published where you have a full roadmap of how you can improve, the different levels you can improve on. So we invite you to also download that and improve your company.
Yeah, indeed. If there are no more questions, because I'm not seeing any questions coming in, I think we can wrap up. Johnny, also big thanks for you for being the co-host for this three-part series about data maturity. This was a bit different from what we typically dive into really the technical content, so this was a bit more zoom out on the leadership aspects of data. I think this was super helpful. I really enjoyed hosting them, so thanks.
I enjoyed it very much.
Cool.
Thanks.
All right, with that being said, guys and girls in the audience, talk to you soon at a meetup or a conference or
the next webinar.
Or the next webinar. Yeah, all right.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.